Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new pair of Ace in a Day gameplays for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode we shall be reviewing the Dewoitine D.501, a French fighter aircraft going to tier of 1 and a battle rating of 1.3. To provide you with a brief historical overview as to the development history of the D500, which eventually culminated in the D501, we begin thus. In response to the C1 specification issued in 1930 by the French Air Ministry for a fighter to replace the existing Nieuport de Large NID-62, Emile Dewoitine submitted his D500 design. In short, this was an open-air cockpit, fixed undercarriage monoplane design with a rather modern all-metal airframe. The prototype, D500.01, flew for the first time on the 18th of June 1932 with positive results. Following further flight testing, the French Air Ministry ordered 60 D500s as of November 1933, the first of these production aircraft flying for the first time on the 29th of November 1934. The D500s were powered by the Hispano-Suiza 12XBRS 690 horsepower liquid-cooled V engine and were armed with two 7.5mm Darne machine guns in the wings, supported by two 7.7mm Vickers machine guns in the nose, albeit these Vickers machine guns would typically be replaced with another two 7.5mm Darne machine guns. In all, a total of 101 D500s were produced, the plane being succeeded by the D501 variant in early 1935. The D501 differed as follows. It featured the Hispano-Suiza 12X CRS engine, again providing 690 horsepower, but this time allowing for the fitting of a 20mm Hispano-Suiza S7 cannon between the engine cylinder banks. This enabled it to fire through the propeller hub. Only the two wing-mounted 7.5mm machine guns were retained in this design, i.e. the Darne machine guns once again. A total of 157 D501s were built, entering service as of July 1935. The plane, along with its D500 predecessor, was never to see combat service however. This is because with the improved D510 design arriving off the production line in October of 1936 and the direct replacement for the D500 and its subsequent aircraft, known as the Hispano-Suiza MS-406 as of January 1939, the D500 and D501 were relegated to regional defence and squadron training activities at the outbreak of the Second World War. And so, with our historical overview concluded, let us take a look at how the D501 handles in War Thunder's arcade mode. Our first game of today is taken from the ground strike map Kharkin Gol. For this we'll be using the following setup. Stealth belts for both types of armament, logic being we want to maximise our damage output, and these belts are the most powerful on offer, or at least in our experience. Our gun convergence is set to 400 metres, reasoning being that in the midst of a turn fight, our foes will normally creep out to 350 metres distance due to the slow nature of our aircraft, more on that later. And this also provides us with a little bit of variability in being able to employ some limited boom and zoom runs, and we're going to see those later on as well. One thing to keep in mind however is that the gun convergence only applies to your machine guns in your wings, not the 20mm cannon mounted in the nose, which is not convergence reliant. And finally, our fuel load is set to the standard 30 minutes to ensure we can make it to the end of the game, unscathed on fuel capacity. Beginning with the climb rate of the 501 then, we note that the climb rate of this aircraft is okay and it's very consistent, but it's not going to win any awards. As a result, I personally found that gaining roughly 700 to 1000 metres altitude at the start of a given match and then levelling out as what you're seeing here is the most ideal approach in this plane, because you'll put yourself in a position whereby you're able to intercept the enemy fighters that have climbed. And the nice thing about your low stall speed of 125 km an hour is, by the time those foes are normally stalling out, such as a P-36 Hawk, you're still climbing up underneath them and you'll still be able to bring your guns to bear on target. On top of that, as we're about to see, following the death of the P-36 Hawk on the enemy team, you're able to put yourself in the flight path of the enemy bombers who may dive down from a level altitude bombing position. Of course, if your foe does not dive down in this instance but decides to level bomb from up on high, you're very limited in what you can do because you don't have the speed and performance to chase them down rapidly. Meaning you may eventually bring that one bomber down up at 4,500 metres altitude, but it will take your entire game to do so. And oddly enough, your ideal altitude performance range is between 2,000 and 3,500 metres altitude. whereby this plane will handle it its best, it will feel very smooth, and the engine will maximise its output. Below 2000 meters altitude, you'll notice a slight drop off in engine performance, but nothing major, which is why, in my personal opinion, if you take this plane below 2000 meters altitude and keep it there for the entirety of a match, you are not compromising your combat capabilities. Your maximum altitude limit is 5,500 meters altitude, at which point your engine performance drops off considerably, just for reference. Now here we're using our wonderful handling characteristics and our ideal altitude range to stall out the D.501 and then come around. Using only our machine guns here, we tear them to pieces for our first kill, demonstrating the importance of not undervaluing your machine guns when your cannon has been exhausted of ammo. As we continue in our boom and zoom pass here, what we'll note is that this plane handles nicely at higher speeds, because its lock-up thresholds are rather high, but we'll talk about those in the second game, because a lot's about to happen. Maintaining our controllability, we come down hard on the D.373, using our 20mm cannon to rip them to pieces, and do the same on the G50, picking up a double kill. We note, however, how poor our energy retention is. We've already lost 100 km an hour in a very short space of time. And as we make a slightly gentle bank over to the left hand side and go for the D.371, we've already cut our speed down by 150 km an hour and even more. Meaning that as we look behind, we now got a D.500 right on our 6 and coming in fast. And that is where the slowness of the D.501 really punishes this aircraft. You can hit the enemy in their territory, but then as you go to break away, you're going to be in the midst of a furball, as we are right now. And bumping our fixed landing gear on the ground, we take off the right hand gear wheel and now snap up towards this CR714, but get the feeling they may go for a head on, so we dodge the incoming fire. Our teammates aiming at it instead, causing them to break off. As we come underneath them, we decide to actually rudder around and make a break for it, because we seem to be cleared. Our friendlies have come in to clear our 6. And as we now break away, we continuously look behind in case we get another pursuer, because we're not going to be able to run away, and we're very precarious of that D.373 who may come after us. But in the end, they decide otherwise. Now going for a reload at this point, we can note that the airframe of the 501 holds up nicely against machine gun fire, whereby if you take hits from the tail section coming towards you, or your foe is behind you, or alternatively hits on the beam, you can soak up a good amount of damage. Just be aware of the fact that due to your open cockpit, pilot snipes are a regularity in this plane and can be rather frustrating, but you need to accept that. Coming around now, we know that the loss of one of our landing gear wheels, and indeed the entire leg, will cause this plane to list to one side, and as a result we're going to be impacted for the rest of the game. And whilst our engine is orange and is therefore suffering from a bit of a performance drop off, it's not too noticeable and you can live with it. But you will note how we're going to be a little bit more cautious as we see a D.500 in the distance who are thinking of engaging in a 1 versus 1, but we decide the better of it because we end up creeping over enemy territory. And this game is going to essentially act, or hopefully it is acting as a demonstration of how the D.501 struggles in enemy territory, whereby you don't have the capability to decide when you want to leave, it's when the foes have been eliminated, and you can't deal with everyone in certain situations, as we saw in the midst of that furball. Sometimes you need to rely on your teammates getting involved. And here we break away from the D.500 because we're worried about the 1 versus 1 and what it could spiral into, because they are effectively the same aircraft as us but with 4 machine guns rather than 2 machine guns and a cannon. Now coming around once again, we're looking down towards the lower decks and we can see that the enemy forces are being dispersed, their attention is being mixed up, and we're going to take on the Breda 88, who seems to be flying and not recognising our incoming presence. And here we'll put our firepower to good use against a more durable aircraft and see that the 20mm cannon in particular can get the job done very nicely as we pick up our ace. Looping over, we look towards the D.501 or alternatively the D.500, but then decide, let's go for this ML1. But the Messerschmitt comes up towards us, grazes our tail, but our control surfaces are still intact. And that is the very nice thing about the control surfaces on this plane. No matter how much damage they take, they hang in there until they are literally broken. And we cut around to take on this D.373, experiencing a slight knock-on effect of the recoil of our 20mm cannon. Another thing you need to be aware of, the fact that you do suffer some recoil when opening fire with your armament, and I would apportion it to the 20mm cannon. We take some grazing shots once again from the ML1, who seems to be burning to death, and now we cut over the top once again looking for our next foe. Potentially as Potes, albeit we've only got our machine guns available, so we're not going to be able to take them out. We can graze them however and hope for an assist, and then we look towards this D.371. And again, whilst they have been set on fire, we want to get them out of the way so we can break home as they're coming around, picking up our 7th and final kill for the game. And with that, let's go take a look at the post-game stats. With our 7 kills and 2 assists, we picked up 6,326 silver lions and 2,080 research points. Hopefully this first gameplay has gone to demonstrate one of the key weaknesses of the 501, and that is its inability to disengage from a dogfight unless the foe has been dispatched or distracted onto another target. And this comes about due to the slow nature of this aircraft. Now I can appreciate for its battle rating you would expect it to be slow, but when at battle rating 1.7 you've got the likes of the Messerschmitt 19 ML1 and the Heinkel 100D1, you have to provide a comparison. This plane is slow in all aspects, whether it be its straight line acceleration, going from its stall speed of 125 km an hour to 280 km an hour, being a very gradual process before its acceleration drops off on raw engine power alone. And you can increase this threshold to 320 km an hour through the application of your 110% engine overdrive. But again, it comes at the cost that once you hit that speed, your acceleration drops off dramatically. In the dive, the same occurs, whereby your maximal dive speed of 635 km an hour is nigh on impossible to reach unless you're diving from an altitude in excess of 5,000 meters to begin with, at which point you'll need to go dead 90 degrees and pull up just before you hit the ground to get to that speed. But we made this plane count where it was needed, and by using its durability thanks to the metallic airframe, we're able to soak up a good amount of damage and give a good amount of damage back in return thanks to the decent firepower of the aircraft, something that sets it apart from the competition at its battle rating. Our second gameplay then is going to show the D.501 in more favourable circumstances, whereby we're able to play over friendly territory for the majority of the game, and I personally feel over friendly territory is where this plane belongs, making sure to stay in the way of those foes who may come to take out your friendly ground units, and as a result, you can really become that home defender that the team needs. For our second and final game of today, we're on the ground strike map Western Europe using the same setup as before. Again, we'll be opening with the same climbing strategy of aiming to gain 700 to 1000 meters altitude to put ourselves in a position whereby we can pose a threat to any given foe who has decided to climb, alternatively spawned in a bomber and decided to level fly. Whilst we're doing this, let's talk a little bit about the manoeuvrability of the 501. Its turn circle in particular is a very strong asset, whereby the only monoplane fighter that's going to outturn this aircraft is the D.501 in my experience. You have the turn circle to rival the likes of the C200, the Ki-43, the Ki-27 and the I-16 Type 5. On top of that, when you bring in your free control surfaces, you really do feel as though you've got an advantage in the middle of a 1 versus 1 dogfight against your monoplane counterparts, whereby your rudder is your strongest control surface. It experiences no lockup at speed, and it enables you to carry out some very tight flat rudder turns, alternatively some very tight hammerheads. Your elevator, on the other hand, is your weakest control surface by far, whereby your loop circle is quite wide. It's going to be nowhere near the likes of P-36A Hawk, and as a result means that when flying low to the ground, as we saw in the first game, you can have a tendency to clip the ground with your fixed landing gear. The elevator suffers a lockup of 25% when you go from 500 to 550 km an hour. And as for your roll rate or your ailerons, well, they're in the middle ground. You've got a very nice roll rate which only begins to lock up at 450 km an hour, maximised into a 50% reduction in roll rate at the time you hit 550 km an hour. And with that, we now come to the tail of an NC223 and try to bring them down through sustained fire. But what we notice, their 20mm cannon is getting quite close, and we really don't want to take a direct hit, because if we do, this plane is probably going to break into two, as it does not absorb 20mm cannon ammunition very well. Machine guns are fine, but not cannon. So we break off and go for a reload. But we've done our job of scratching that enemy bomber and forcing them down to lower altitude, where our friendlies can now hit them en masse. In the meantime, we can see 3 enemy aircraft all gathered over friendly territory below us, the SBD3, the Ki-43 and the P-26, and we're going to swoop in and try to take all 3 of them out. We'll focus to begin with on the Ki-43, as they're the most manoeuvrable fighter and the one that could take up the majority of our time and enable the situation to turn into the hypothetical 3 versus 1 against us. We'll latch onto the 6, and we only need to clip them once to take them out. Coming around, we can see the SBD3 coming out of a turn, and we aim in and take them out for a double kill, before looking towards the P-26. But what we notice, with the number of friendlies behind them, i.e. our guys, we don't want to get embroiled in a head-on whereby they could clip us or our allies could clip us, so we break away via a snap roll and live to fight another day. Now, having conducted that series of manoeuvres, we gain a little bit of altitude and put ourselves back over friendly territory once again. And we can rinse and repeat this approach. We wait for our foes to come to us and we defend the home territory. That way, minimising the number of ground targets that we lose and at the same time adding to our killer count. And we can see how the D.501 is more comfortable in this situation where it's not having to make inroads into enemy territory, but instead lets the enemies come to it. This I-15 coming over now is going to be another example as we finish reloading our cannon, whereby we have the energy advantage and we have all the cards in our favour by the 1 versus 1 dogfight capability. Because in general, biplanes are much more manoeuvrable than the D.501 in terms of turn circle and all the control surfaces put together, where it be the least manoeuvrable biplanes such as the Heinkel HE51 through to the likes of the Dewoitine. Coming about once more, we see a B5N2 coming in for the kill. Unfortunately, we can't get a decent enough angle on them, meaning that our shots go wide, and they do hit some of our friendly units. But we're just going to pull some distance because we can see a massive enemy forces have come over. We'll gain the altitude, but we've also got the P-36 Hawk to worry about. It's a good thing we look to our 6, and that's one thing to note is the fact foes can come up on you very quickly at times. And here we are being forced into a bit of a dogfight against the Hawk, but cutting over the top of their fire and looking towards them, we can see we can outmaneuver them very quickly, coming around now as we've got 10 seconds left on our cannon reload, and we look up towards them with our machine guns here. Following them, using our very low stall speed to be able to continually pursue them as they were gradually starting to head towards the stall by the looks of things, and we take out their pilot with just our machine guns for another kill. Again, iterating the fact that the machine guns in this plane will get the job done if needs be. Here we latch onto the CR-714, knocking out their pilot, and then look towards the B5N2 from earlier, trying to take them out, and we pick up another double kill. That's our 6th kill, from what I understand. Going for a reload, we can see we're exhausting ammunition quickly, but we're also using the interludes to take our reloads. And again, we can approach situations with confidence. If the machine guns are loaded and it's only one foe and we seem to have enough time on target, we'll get the job done with the machine guns. We don't need the cannon to be ready to get the job done. And that's something that gives this plane an advantage over the likes of the D.501 HS9, where it's reliant on the 220mm cannon. One other question to wonder is, what is the ideal speed range of this aircraft? Well, due to the limited capability of this plane to build speed, I would set the ideal speed range between 225 and 325 km an hour, whereby if you can keep your plane speed between there, you'll be at your maximal manoeuvrability based on your speed and not altitude, and therefore you'll be able to apply yourself to a number of manoeuvres back to back and not have to worry about levelling out and building up energy once again. That's the nice thing about the 501, it handles very well in that 1 versus 1 finicky dogfight, so long as it remains a 1 versus 1, because you have everything within your grasp in terms of manoeuvrability, controllability. It's just making sure you have enough time to execute your actions effectively. And swooping down the P-26 pea shooter here for our 7th and final kill of this match, taking out their tail control. We can see that the game's about to come to its end, although we'll be looking to take out a ground target, because with the 20mm cannon you can knock out ground targets quite effectively and hopefully wrap this game up for the team. We know there's one ground target left. We're just watching the enemy forces to see whether they'll be covering it. We've targeted the armoured car and now we're going in. And it's going to be a while before we get there. Again, our limited dive acceleration really showing itself through. But this target is not covered and it means we've got ample opportunity. The only time we really want to make an attack into enemy territory being when there's very limited enemy presence around or a window has opened up, and one that's a very wide window for us to cut into. So with the ground target now eliminated, game's over. Let's take a look at the post-game stats once again. With our 7 kills and single ground target destroyed, we picked up 16,229 silver lions and 2,066 research points. To defeat the D.501 in a given matchup then, I can recommend one or two options. The first, if you are flying any type of biplane, is to lure the 501 into a turn fight, whereby you will have all the cards in your favour, in terms of a tighter turn circle and greater responsiveness on all 3 control surface domains. And if the 501 pilot decides to run from you when you're on their 6, you'll have the time on target to bring them down, because remember the 501 is a slow aircraft and does not accelerate quickly. The alternative approach, if you're flying a monoplane fighter such as the P-36 Hawk or the Heinkel 100D1, is to use your superior engine performance and climb rate in order to get above the 501 and strike it rapidly from afar, via a series of boom and zoom passes, whereby the 501 pilot will eventually succumb to your firepower and fall out the sky. Remember, the airframe of this aircraft is durable, not immortal. But by avoiding such circumstances today in our own 501, hopefully in the second gameplay we've demonstrated where it plays at its best, when it is in the regional defence role, much like what it was used for historically. When you had the advantage of teammates on call, and on top of that waiting for your foes to come to you, you can really use the firepower and manoeuvrability of the 501 in order to bring down any foe that comes your way, and you can always rely on the support of your teammates in order to get you out of a tricky situation if a furball develops. They say in sports there's such a terminology as the home advantage, whereby playing at home really gives you that extra boost that you need to overcome the opposition, and in the case of the 501 that definitely rings true. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Hopefully next time this Cold War have left me, ladies and gentlemen, but until then, take care and good luck in the skies.